Breaking news just moments ago. The FBI, they have just broken into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone. They no longer need Apple's help. Now, it's unclear how they cracked the phone. Now, though, the court case gets to move on. Joining me now, Tammy Bruce, Steve Rogers, Jillian Melchior, and Rod Wheeler. Rod, from a law enforcement perspective, detectives investigating this, I'm sure everyone's cheering. However, law enforcement still has a serious bone to pick with Apple with respect to all of these phones, either used by criminals or terrorists.
Well, you're exactly right. Good evening to you, Charles. I can tell you that what you just announced is a stunning development in this entire case because, as you know, the FBI and Apple has been somewhat at a, complete separation in terms of whether or not Apple was going to allow the FBI to break into the phone of the San Bernardino suspects. Now, the good news for law enforcement is that the digital forensic experts at the FBI was able to crack open the phone. Now, the FBI just issued a statement saying that they used a mysterious method of access to gain access to the phone. What they have not said is what that mysterious method is, and you can rest assured you're going to start seeing freedom of information requests flying all over the city.
And I guess, Jillian, this could, guys, all of you, be the worst nightmare for Apple. At least this is what they were saying. Once this key is developed, ultimately, it will get in the hands of the wrong people.
Yeah, I think this is the classic, privacy versus safety debate. And in a world that's so tech-savvy, this is something that consumers have to be worried about. I do think the silver lining for Apple is they held their ground on this.
Right. So from that public relations point of view, it's so funny. I saw a tweet from Frank Lunt saying that Apple won. That wasn't my first reaction. No, I didn't think that. I don't know. But I could see where they would say, we didn't do it. We didn't hand it over. You, the customer, we have your back against these intrusive governments.
This was not a silver lining for Apple. It was a dark night for America. The fact of the matter is that this had to be treated as a national security issue, not a criminal issue. Apple did not step up and help law enforcement. So, Charles, may I add, not only does the FBI and law enforcement have a bone to pick with Apple, but so do the American people.
Tammy?
Well, look, Apple said that they're going to be doing even more security for their next phone. We also heard that it was an Israeli firm that was helping them do it. So our national security is not necessarily going to be left up to us hoping corporate America will assist, but this still remains a very important ethical conversation about the responsibilities of corporations and our ability to investigate in this weird new world of new media and terrorism.
And isn't that a shame, Tammy? Isn't it a shame? You just nailed it. Corporate America needs to step up and help secure this country.
Well, but do you agree, though? Then do you find Apple at fault here? Do you
well,
think
look,
that
as long as I don't like what the NSA was doing, but we do have a system that exists where there is courts and warrants that look at a specific situation. We all have to react to a warrant when it is served. A landlord has to let you into an apartment if it's ordered. A hotel has to. These are things that we've all agreed as a society are required as long as other individuals look and say this is urgent enough, it's important enough, people's lives are at stake. Why we would suddenly ignore those rules because it's Apple or electronics is beyond me, because those same rules apply to the new world as well.
Rod, the Apple argument, of course, is that as they would unlock one person's phone, millions of other phones would become vulnerable to the same sort of intrusions, so that they were trying to paint themselves as some sort of superhero, company here.
By protecting the public.
Yeah, where do you fall on this?
Yeah, not at all. I think this is a great day for law enforcement. I'm glad that the FBI was able to crack open that particular cell phone. Let me tell you, here's the bottom line here. This is a matter of national security. This isn't a matter of just somebody trying to steal people's telephone numbers, Charles. And the FBI was adamant about getting into this cell phone. Why? Because we can prevent, with data and information from the San Bernardino cell phones, we can prevent hopefully situations that we just saw happen over in Brussels. And so this was huge. And I'll tell you that the FBI did a tremendous job by utilizing their in-house forensic experts to crack open that
Charles,
phone.
Rod and I have been around a long time in law enforcement, and I know I can speak for Rod on this. If the law enforcement has built a lock, there's going to be a criminal in due time to break it. Right, Rod? They're going to break it.
That's right.
Well, Jillian, that's another thing. Apple's saying, well, this was an impossible project. Obviously, it wasn't impossible. To that degree, they certainly have egg on their face. They seem disingenuous and now that this has actually been broken.
Yeah, I mean, that may be the way that this is interpreted. I think where the story is going, though, is what's on the phone. And that's going to be a really important development in coming days. I mean, it's hard to speculate what might be on it, but it's important for future of national security.
That's going to reinforce either Apple's argument or the federal government's. If there is a whole host of names of people here or even, God forbid, in Europe prior to the Brussels attack, who knows what this linkage is, and we're going to find out.
Well, speaking of Brussels, in one of the homes where the chemicals are stored, there was a broken iPad, and now, there's speculation that it was left there deliberately to throw the law enforcement off the trail. But certainly, in this age of technology, there's a certain kind of responsibility that technology companies, they may not want to accept, but I think they're going to have to. Twitter took down a bunch of accounts after the fact. And maybe it's a fine line to find where that area is.
Well, Jillian brought up a very good point, and Jillian, you're right. What's on the phone?
Yeah.
And if we find, as Tammy says, that there are additional suspects and plans of attacks, that's going to change the entire ballgame.
And look, just because you're opening one phone, any more than if you break into or use a locksmith to get into one apartment, it doesn't mean that then law enforcement, well, they could, I suppose, go into every apartment. They're held down from being able to do so. It's like a wild animal. I agree. You can't necessarily trust the government, but this is where new rules and transparency
But this is the same lock that can unlock all of those apartments.
Not necessarily. Well,
to a certain degree.
Yes,
that's what Apple's saying.
Right, that's what Apple's saying.
But yes, but there can be. You could make a master key or even just knock down doors if you want to.
But Tammy,
and we don't because of the rules of law.
As Rod articulated, we're at war, for goodness sakes. This is a matter of national security.
Which is why we will go from warrant to warrant and judge to judge, and that's why it works.
Rod, we understand when it comes to terrorism and the urgency factor, where with law enforcement, where should a line be drawn? Because we know that there have been requests for Apple to do this for other cases, local cases, not involving a threat to all humanity per se, but involving criminal activity. Is there some line that Apple can say, okay, this is too much, you're asking too much of us?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think Apple should have any final say one way or the other in a case like this, Charles, because remember, we're talking about the greater good. We're talking about what's best for the most people in this country. And let me tell you, the FBI was spot on with this, and Steve Rogers has talked about this before in your show, that by not allowing the FBI to get into that phone, we're putting the nation at further risk. And we got a lot of situations going on now. We look at what happened in Brussels, and if we don't start gaining access to some of these criminals' access data points, then what's going to happen is we're going to lose this entire war against these ISIS and other groups.
Yeah.